In the Starz television series Black Sails, one particularly infamous scene depicts the execution of Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, by keelhauling, a brutal method in which the condemned is bound and dragged beneath a ship's keel. In the show, he is pulled repeatedly under the vessel, suffering severe injuries as his body scrapes against barnacles and muscles encrusted on the hull. But was keelhauling ever truly employed as a form of corporal punishment? The answer is complex. Among the many harsh disciplinary measures used at sea during the age of sail, few are as brutal or as feared as keelhauling. While its historical use is often debated, it has long been cited as one of the most extreme and unforgiving punishments inflicted on sailors. Keelhauling was a severe form of corporal punishment, and in some cases a method of execution historically inflicted upon sailors at sea. Typically reserved for serious offences such as mutiny or piracy, it served as a grim deterrent to breaches of naval discipline. The punishment involved stripping the offending sailor and restraining him in a way that prevented any ability to swim. Heavy objects such as cannonballs or chains were often tied to his legs to ensure submersion. The sailor was then secured with two ropes, one tied to his back and attached to a yardarm, the horizontal spar on a ship's mast, and another looped beneath the hull to the opposite side of the same yardarm. Once lowered into the water, the weight would drag the sailor beneath the waves. To control the depth and trajectory, the crew, sometimes the entire ship's company, would haul on the second rope, dragging the sailor beneath the keel and eventually hoisting him up on the opposite side. The process often resulted in severe lacerations from barnacles and marine growth on the hull, and could easily lead to drowning, unconsciousness, or death. The primary intent behind keelhauling was not merely the threat of drowning, though that was a very real risk, but the brutal physical trauma inflicted as the sailor's body scraped against the ship's barnacle-encrusted hull. The submerged portion of a vessel was often heavily coated with hardened marine growth, and being dragged across it could result in deep lacerations, extensive blood loss, severe mutilation, and in extreme cases, even the loss of limbs or decapitation. The degree of injury often depended on the speed at which the sailor was hauled beneath the ship. A slower pull allowed the body to sink deeper, potentially avoiding direct contact with the hull's abrasive surface. However, a faster pull would keep the body in continuous contact with the encrusted keel, significantly increasing the severity of injuries. In cases where the ship was newly constructed, recently careened, or too small for a transverse haul, the punishment was sometimes administered from bow to stern rather than from side to side. Victims of this brutal punishment were often not brought back aboard the ship immediately. Instead, they were left suspended from the yard arm as a grim, invisible warning to the rest of the crew. In instances where the captain deemed the injuries insufficient, the entire process could be repeated. As one of the most severe maritime punishments, keelhauling rarely left survivors and served as a powerful deterrent to disobedience or mutiny. Such extreme measures were permitted at sea due to the strict hierarchical structure aboard ships, where sailors were expected to adhere unquestioningly to the authority of ship owners and officers. Despite its grisly reputation, much debate remains over the actual prevalence and implementation of keelhauling. Questions persist about how frequently it was used, how widespread the practice was, and which naval and maritime traditions employed it. The historical record is limited. Few official documents or first-hand accounts provide detailed descriptions. However, references to keelhauling in early texts and depictions in period artwork confirm that the practice was not merely folklore or pirate legend. It was in fact a genuine, if rare, form of maritime punishment. The earliest definitive reference to keelhauling appears in the Byzantine Rhodian Maritime Code, dating around 700 CE, which outlines penalties for acts such as piracy. Additionally, a possible description of the practice or a variation of it can be found in the histories by Greek historian Herodotus. These early accounts may refer either to surpato, suspending a person over water, or to a true form of keelhauling. Keelhauling later gained notoriety as a particularly severe form of corporal punishment used by European naval forces. During the Age of Sail, it was officially sanctioned by both the Dutch and English navies, making them the only maritime powers known to have formally adopted the practice. Other nations may have employed it on occasion, but there is little evidence to suggest it was ever widespread beyond these two European powers. Notable 17th century English seafarers such as Admiral William Monson and Privateer Nathaniel Butler recorded references to keelhauling aboard English naval vessels. However, these mentions are often vague, lacking precise detail or dates, which has contributed to the ongoing debate surrounding the frequency and formal implementation of the practice. The The practice of keelhauling is described in the Universal Dictionary of the Marine, a British naval reference published in 1780, as plunging the delinquent repeatedly under the ship's bottom on one side and hoisting him up on the other after having passed under the keel. The same text notes that keelhauling was a form of punishment inflicted for various offences in the Dutch Navy, suggesting that by the late 18th century the Royal Navy no longer employed the practice if it ever did so officially. In 1880, British politician George Shaw Lefevre was questioned in Parliament regarding a report from Italy that alleged a keelhauling had taken place aboard the HMS Alexandra. He categorically denied the incident, further reinforcing the perception that keelhauling was not practiced within the Royal Navy in the modern era. The most concrete evidence for the formal implementation of keelhauling comes from the Dutch Navy. Some historians suggest that the punishment may have been introduced under William of Orange, who would coincidentally later become King of England in 1689. Though officially sanctioned, it appears to have been used sparingly, reserved for the most serious breaches of discipline. One of the most well-documented cases occurred on the 11th of October 1652. Under the command of Dutch navigator Jan van Riebeek, a sailor named Jan Blank was subjected to keelhauling, received 150 lashes, and was subsequently sentenced to 2 years of forced labour as punishment for deserting the Dutch East India Company, despite having been absent for only 9 days. It is also documented that Cornelis Evertsen the Youngest, Supreme Commander of the Dutch Navy, employed keelhauling as a punishment for sailors found guilty of murder. While the British are believed to have ceased the use of keelhauling around 1720, the Dutch not officially abolished the practice until 1750. One of the most well-known visual representations of keelhauling appears in the work of Dutch Golden Age painter Lee Verveershire, titled The Keelhauling of the Ship's Surgeon of Admiral Jan van Ness, created between 1660 and 1686. The painting, which is part of the collection at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, offers a vivid depiction of the punishment. It shows hundreds of onlookers gathered to witness the event, some pointing, others watching intently, as the surgeon, hands and feet bound, is suspended from the foremast and lowered overboard. The scene strongly suggests that keelhauling was not only a disciplinary measure, but also a public spectacle intended to instill fear and reinforce discipline among the crew. But why was Admiral Jan van Ness's ship's surgeon subjected to keelhauling? What transgression warranted such an extreme and public punishment? The painting currently known as The Keelhauling of the Ship's Surgeon of Admiral Jan van Ness bears this title by tradition, though in past centuries it was known under various names. A 1909 book on the history of the Rijksmuseum recalls these earlier titles, which commonly suggest that the ship's surgeon poisoned the admiral and was subsequently keelhauled or executed on the River Meuse. Dutch maritime historian Prudhomme van Reyne explains that the original description of the painting was provided by Frans Munnekeisen, a pastor who had received several works related to Van Ness. In 1800, Munnekeisen sold these Van Ness paintings, including the keelhauling depiction, to the Constabulary, the institution that later evolved into the Rijksmuseum, under the supervision of art broker Cornelis Sibyl Roos. According to the account passed from Munnekeisen to Roos, the ship's surgeon had attempted to poison Admiral Jan van Ness, a crime punishable by death. Munnekeisen claimed that Van Ness, showing clemency, commuted the sentence to keelhauling. However, there is no contemporary documentation to support this story, despite the fact that such crimes and their punishments were typically well recorded in the 17th century. Alongside this, no mention of the painting appears in Van Ness's will, and it cannot be discounted that Munnekeisen may have fabricated the tale to link the work more closely with the Van Ness family. Regardless of this story's authenticity, keelhauling endures as one of the most harrowing and brutal forms of maritime punishment from the age of sail. In modern times, both naval professionals and the public regard the practice as inhumane and barbaric. Nevertheless, the term keelhauling has taken on a metaphorical life of its own in contemporary language, used to describe severe reprimands or disciplinary actions. The sheer brutality of the act, combined with the fear it once inspired, has ensured its lasting place in both maritime history and popular culture, long after its actual use was abandoned. This has been me, Jack. If you're being keelhauled right now, please leave a comment down below.